NBC Black, BBC News, and most recently joined as a member of the Women's Media Center. She's also the producer of a very successful comedy series, Sisters of Comedy, which is hosted by Caroline's on Broadway. So everyone, please help me in welcoming Agunda Okeo.
Wonderful to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. So next we have another dynamic lady, Christina Coleman, who I must note used to be my former boss at newsone.com. But she sadly left us to go to no other than essence.com, where she is the senior news and culture editor. Christina is a vet in the field. She's covered everything from earth and science at NASA to politics, and delivers poignant commentary in her video series for Essence titled The Over-Explainer. I'd also like to point out that she is a self-proclaimed undercover chef, and her fashion game is always on point. So Christina Coleman, everyone.
You're so sweet.
And last but not least, I'd like to introduce Jamira Burley. Jamira has been fighting, yes. Jamira has been fighting on the front lines in the arena of advocacy and community policy since her teenage years. She's worked for Amnesty International, the United Nations, and some of the biggest names in politics, including Hillary Clinton. She was one of NBC Black's 28 Under 28 and was recently named to Forbes' 30 Under 30 list. Everyone, please welcome Jamira Burley. And I just want to know how hard it was for me to list all of your accolades in a short snippet, because with a short period of time, you all have done so much, so we thank you. Before we get into the discussion, I want to do a short exercise in the tradition of Kimberly Crenshaw. She is the director of the African American Policy Forum and a notable lawyer and feminist who coined the hashtag Say Her Name, which helped raise visibility for these Black women who have been killed by the police. So if you'll just, humor me, I'd like everyone to stand. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to read a list of Black women who have been killed by the police or died while they were in police custody. Once you hear a name that you don't recognize, please take a seat. So is everybody good on what to do? Okay, cool. Sandra Bland, Rekia Boyd, Deborah Danner, Corinne Gaines, Barbara Dawson, Charlena Lyles, Joni Block, Alteria Woods, Robin White, Morgan London Rankins. So just from that exercise alone, we can see that there's work to do in raising visibility of these names, of these women who have been killed by the police. So I just also wanted to note that the Washington Post has an ongoing study where they have been tracking the names and numbers of people who have been killed by police since 2015, and for this they've won a Pulitzer Prize. To date, there have been 622 people fatally shot by the police in 2017. And out of that number, a quarter of them were suffering from mental illness. 5 Black women have been gunned down by police this year, according to WAPO's report. And those were the last 5 names I called out in the standing exercise that we just did. A recent CDC report states that Black women were killed at a higher rate than any other ethnic group. The study, conducted from 2013 to 2014, gathered stats from 18 states and showed that Black women were killed at a rate of 4.4 per 100,000 people. And there was a recent study by Georgetown that showed that Black school-age girls are viewed as less innocent than their peers. And while the world continues to keep us on watch for trends on hair, clothing, and the latest dance moves, our humanity is constantly ignored. So I just wanted to get into the questions for our panelists because they have a lot to say and we want to hear what they have to say. So my first question to you 3 is, why do you believe that Black women and Black transgender women are repeatedly removed from the conversation when we talk about who is affected by state-sanctioned violence?
Well, I can start with that. It's easy. It's an easy question. That was sarcasm, by the way. I think the reason why the experiences and violence, sexual violence, physical violence that Black women and trans Black women experience is not included in the broad conversation about security or kind of human dignity or anything like that, is because it's emblematic to perpetuating the systems of domination that have kept this country in its imperial power from the beginning of its origination. In the sense that, I guess what I'm trying to say is that if people were to recognize what is happening to some of the most vulnerable women in this country, they would have to actually try to dismantle a lot of these systems that make those women vulnerable. So I think it's something where when we're talking about even indigenous women, for instance, people not talking about the widespread rape of indigenous women who are also targeted by police and who are also incredibly vulnerable. That's because the people want to continue to perpetuate state-sponsored violence towards these groups and these communities, right? So it's also, to me, an indication of how valuable that community is. Because if you work so hard to undermine a community, if you work so hard not to acknowledge things that happen to them, if you work so hard to disempower their sense of identity and agency, that's because they have power. So I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that we are powerful, and there are a lot of forces that are interested and invested in making us feel disempowered.
Thank you. Christina, did you want to add to that?
I was simply going to say, like, if no one had jumped in, because we're the
Right.
I mean, I know that's okay. Let me try to watch my language up here. But because we are so powerful, I mean, you look at how many Black women are running for office post-Trump, and you realize the power, the political power that we have. You realize how much we influence this world through trends, the cultural appropriation of Black women, how much people mine from Black women in general, just every single part about us that they mine from us. And they recognize our power. In recognizing our power, they also realize that we could be in charge, that we could take over. And it's important that they meaning the systems in America and America itself, suppress that. It's imperative for them to do that to uphold the system of white supremacy, or this world of white supremacy that we've so long lived in, that still looms very large here in America.
And just to add to that, I think in doing this work, what you realize is that for decades in removing the Black man from the household, to kill the Black woman and to silence her experiences would be the kind of the final nail in the coffin to ruin the communities where Black people live and breathe. Because Black women have held those communities for so long, have been able to survive despite Black men being removed from those communities, to raise their families, to advocate on their own behalf, while still setting the trends. I think this would actually be the final nail in actually ensuring that the Black community doesn't thrive. I think what's interesting about the struggle of Black women, while we're so often forgotten, not just by the systems, we're often forgotten by the men that are supposed to love and respect us. And I think that's the scariest part about it, is that you don't know who really has your back, and you also don't know who's your enemy. And so we're constantly struggling to figure out, how do we both advocate and love the people who look like us, while also fearing them for our own safety. So it's a struggle.
No doubt. And thank you all for that great commentary. I wanted to talk about your personal kind of enlightenment. What was your personal breaking point the moment you noticed it was problematic that the deaths of Black women at the hands of police were being overlooked and ignored? And I can start with me. I think for me, Sandra Bland was when I kind of woke up. I mean, I had woken up from Trayvon, but I felt I was just graduating from my grad school program at Columbia Journalism School, and it was like my first moment of having to report, not just watch, but report on something that was happened to someone who could have been my sister, my cousin. So for me, I think Sandra Bland was like the point where I knew that this was a problem. And she did get a lot of news attention, but then after her, there were so many that didn't. And I think the aftermath is what really bothered me as well.
I think I can speak on that. One, I think it's something you always know. So my philosophy in news, would consider myself an advocacy journalist, is to always uphold the Black woman. And just piggyback off of you, that is my goal in life, is to advocate for Black women because no one else is going to do it. We are the only people that will advocate for us, right? So I knew it existed, and it wasn't until, really it was Sandra Bland. It was going to Ferguson literally a day after Mike Brown was shot and killed, and spending time there, and spending time in the streets, and getting tear gassed, and just being in that space, going back in November and waiting for the indictment that never came down. The following year, going to Baltimore, spending a week in Baltimore, and then having Sandra Bland's death happen and not see Black men, people who look like us, brown people, and our allies get out in the streets for women that look like me. And I couldn't believe it because I'm not an organizer. I would like to consider myself an activist, but we were all in the streets every day. In November of 2014, we would literally leave work and go straight to a protest for Black men. And nobody did that for Sandra Bland. Nobody did that for Corinne Gaines. And it's hurtful because these are the same men that we uphold and we lift up. And the response to not coming out in the street was, well, was she talking back? Well, what did she do?
Was she an angry Black woman?
Mm-hmm. Was she an angry Black woman? And that's always the thing that diminishes us. They try to diminish our power, they try to diminish our life and our humanity by saying, well, you were angry, and so you deserved it.
Well, I think it's interesting you mentioned Sandra Bland, because I think what shocked me about Sandra Bland is that if you watch the videos that she put out prior to being killed, it was in support of recognizing the death of Black men. She was calling it out. She was fighting. She was doing what she could within her position to actually speak out on that. And to see the response from the community wasn't reciprocated for her experience, I think was devastating to me. Especially, I grew up in a family with 10 older brothers, and for the last portion of my advocacy. Yeah, girl.
I was like, damn.
My struggle be real. And I've always, my entire life, my work started out because of the murder of my brother, and I didn't realize that my life wasn't valued, even though I had been advocating for Black men, was when I saw Sandra Bland. And I was reminded the fact that I had experienced similar things to my brothers, but yet I didn't see my experience as something to advocate as well. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of times Black women don't realize that we're just as traumatized. We're faced with the same issues. If any times we're more brutalized by police because our experience is silent, and yet we're more willing, not willing, because I think a lot of Black women are now doing that, we're more willing, or we see the community see more value in speaking up on the Black man's experience before our own.
I would say, certainly Sandra Bland was something that impacted me, but even before she was taken from us, I think as an immigrant, and because a lot of times I had to deal with certain systems in this country, in the process of, kind of going through things, getting your green card and things like that, I saw how the state, dealt with me. You know what I mean? How it treated me. And even connecting that to my experience as a Kenyan immigrant, originally from Kenya, there's a huge problem with trafficking of girls and women in Kenya. There's a huge, huge problem with that to Europe and to the Middle East. And it's, girls as young as 10 or 12 or whatever. It's a huge problem right now. And when I can be in this country and know that that's a huge issue that no one's talking about here, when I can know that even technically for me as an immigrant woman, there's a way in which I feel particularly vulnerable, there's almost no trail. You know what I mean? I could just disappear. You know what I mean? The state would just erase me. You know what I mean? Like, having that kind of consciousness, especially growing up here in New York City, growing up in the States, and seeing that, in addition to recognizing my kind of relationship and connection and solidarity with Black women in this country, and the history of systemic racism and sexism and marginalization. When that happened to Sandra, I was so upset about that, but I was also kind of infuriated that we hadn't really been talking about it even before her. And then even since her death, we haven't really done it justice. Like, we haven't really gotten into the disproportionate cases of Black women being raped by police officers. We don't talk about that. And it's a huge problem. There was a woman just last week there was a case of officers who had searched her vagina for 11 minutes. And it was a case in Texas and Houston, and the officers just got off, 2 police officers. They have video of it, and the whole thing was that they were debating whether or not they had penetrated or not penetrated. And you're like, one, why are you having a conversation about a woman's vagina like this? A. What is it about her that makes you feel comfortable to speak about her body as it's separate from her, right? And then also, how are these 2 police officers free? How is that okay? And there's video of it. You know what I mean? So, for me, it was like, there's a systemic, historical, rooted issue in this country with valuing Black women and treating them with human dignity. And Sandra Bland was a really infuriating illustration of that, for sure. Yeah.
And just to add one more thing, the prison that Sandra Bland was killed at now has the rights to actually house immigrants through the process of deportation. So the intersectionality continues to build, and I think we have to make sure we look at that as we talk about Black women.
Right.
Totally.
Right.
I think too, it's important to note that historically, Black women in this country, when we were illegally brought here, our bodies were never ours. We were breeders. We were raped. We were maimed. We were lynched right along with our brothers. And, there's no Nat Turner story for us, And I just think that goes into just even how we're raised. We're taught to shrink ourselves. We're taught to be smaller, be quieter, be meeker, And I just feel like those things add to some of these things that are happening to us, unfortunately. And I would say too, I forgot what you had said. You had made another point about, it escapes my mind, but I just feel that we have to, as Black women, we also are raised to be so strong, to not feel vulnerable, to not show our weakness, to always kind of be there and but who's there for us?
Right.
Who's standing up for us?
Right.
And I just think that those things, it all is just like a big mixing pot that makes this formula. And until we dismantle some of these things, until we dismantle some of the ways that we think, it's just going to keep happening, unfortunately.
And I would never want to implicate Black women or demonize us or anything like that. But I think that we also subscribe to these systems. It's just natural that we do. We've been in them for so long. And I often have to catch my own mother when she says things like, oh, because they're killing all these Black men in the streets. And I have to remind her that women that look like you and I are being killed and brutally sexualized and raped and robbed and stripped every single day. And so I think we tell ourselves that when we talk about, there's an issue, because when we talk about state violence, people think we're only talking about police brutality. That's one. Well, that's false.
Right.
Okay? And when we talk about police brutality, people think we're only talking about Black men. And so we have to start changing that conversation, because not only are police officers killing Black women, but we also see it, we're affected in our homes. Who do you think holds the weight or bears the brunt of these Black men being killed in the streets?
Or when they're taken away to jail.
Yeah.
Right.
Women. Right. The economical, the mental, all of that falls on us. So it's about getting out that system, because sometimes we also fall victim to it and we can perpetuate it.
Okay. This question is inevitable. So over the weekend, 45, made mind-blowing comments about the violence that occurred in Charlottesville. As journalists like to say, he later doubled down again on Tuesday and this morning in a series of tweets, his favorite messaging portion of choice, where he defended white supremacists and Confederate imagery, as we all know. As Black women, who are one of the highest acceptable groups in terms of violence, how do we get through this period of PTT, or post-traumatic Trump syndrome, as I like to call it?
Get through it? I mean, all I can say is that I really wish the world would have listened to Black women in November. Because we got it. I think even people who worked on the campaign, people who didn't work on the campaign, like, they understood the larger picture. And I think, unfortunately, Black women are now going to bear the brunt of whatever happens in many cases. But what I will say is that I have never been more afraid of the skin I live in than during Trump's presidency. Like, I just moved here to New York from DC, and living in DC after the election and seeing people with red hats on, or seeing a white man approach me or walk near me broad daylight, I just didn't feel comfortable. And I think it's a reflection of how dangerous 45 really is. Not that he's creating new crazy people, but he's really intensifying and opening the door for all the people who've been hiding for the last decade. And I think only way we can really survive is if we band together. If we leave all of the issues that divide us, not out of the way, but really think about where are the intersectionalities and how we can stand up for each other, even when we're not directly impacted. I think that will allow us to not only survive, but be able to recover, because we're gonna have to do it. There's gonna be a cleanup. And Black women have always been called in to clean it up. So I think we just have to be prepared for that.
You know, I think this, like, one of the things I struggle with as an immigrant is the American dream, to me, is one of the most hyperbolic lies I've ever actually heard of in my life. And we send it out like a megaphone through the country, and it reverberates throughout the rest of the world. And even though the kind of essence of what it's trying to say is something that I think almost every human being can get behind, it's rarely actually even enacted that way for anybody, right? Because let's face it, even the American dream essentially is manifest destiny, which was genocide. I mean, that's essentially, in my view, what it is. And a lot of African immigrants or people who come from other parts of the world recognize it as such, because we come here thinking we might be getting access to something that our neo-colonial nations have been giving us. Then you come here and you see your own brothers and sisters being treated like chattel to this day. And it's something where, when I look at what has gone on in this past weekend and the president's tweets and his continued support of white supremacy, because he is a white supremacist, I think that this is an opportunity for us to have some sobering conversations within the Black community, certainly, and I think that's a priority. And then when it comes to our allies and those people who are supporting kind of combating anti-Black racism, I think it's an opportunity for them to take off some of their rose-colored glasses and really look at the world the way that it is. Because it's just not sustainable. Even if you think about climate change, you can't keep going down this path.
Climate change doesn't exist.
Right? You know what I'm saying? Like,
global warming doesn't exist.
Try to tell a Kenyan farmer that. They know what time it is. You know what I'm saying? Where's the rain? It ain't coming because it's climate change. You know what I'm saying? So the thing is that I think it's an opportunity for us to really face what's going on. These white supremacist groups have been growing in this country, especially since Obama became president. They've been increasing in numbers. Southern Poverty Law Center says that this is the second consecutive year of white supremacist hate groups increasing. This is March that happened in Charlottesville, was the largest gathering of white supremacists in the past 20 years. So it's something where, like, this is not about us necessarily feeling less or anything like that. I think also fear is a natural emotion in terms of protecting yourself, and I think people should protect themselves. But I'm just not trying to have any more bullshit conversations right now. You know what I'm saying? Like, I can't do it. I can't do it, especially when I know that our bodies are on the line. So, you know, that's my take on Mr. 45 and whatever he's talking about.
I'm struggling through this. I walked in here today and walked up to you and I was like, because I just am like, the veneers, the veil, whatever you want to call it, is off. I'm so tired.
Right.
I am fatigued. I am exhausted. I work in digital. It's 24/7. It's news all the time. It's Donald Trump's tweets. I get home. I have to watch CNN. We have to edit the night editor. It never stops. It literally never stops for us, for organizers, for activists, for journalists. It never stops. And so I'm struggling to come up with a plan on how to get through this. But I know that we will, because Black women are resilient. And so we will. However, two things. One, I know we need a plan. And so while I was very willing to put my body on the line, my physical body on the line, to be in the streets, you know, when a Black man or Black woman is killed, I am not so ready to jump in the front of the line right now. And that's okay. And I want you guys to know that's okay. So when somebody texts you and they're like, oh, there's a protest at Trump Tower right now because some white supremacists came down. It is not your obligation to run down there at this moment and put yourself on the line because you've been putting yourself on the line. It is not time for us to step up because it's their time to step up. I'm sorry. This is their fight. These white folk got to come in and do what they're supposed to do. Period, point blank. And I mean, there will come a time that we organize and we get out there. I know there's a march coming up soon that maybe you want to talk about. Right. But I'm just, at this point, I think to self-preserve and to self-care, like, I'm not about to jump out there right now, especially when these men have weaponized themselves. They have been preparing for this moment, and I know what my Black life means on that street. It means nothing, and I'm going to preserve it until we have a plan and we can come together, because I'm not about to get popped upside the head by a white supremacist and the cop do nothing about it. And I just want you to know that that's fine. That's totally fine. The second thing, I know a lot of people didn't feel me when I said that. Like, I've been getting texts all week like, girl, there's this protest. Okay. You can go.
I'll tweet about it.
Right, I'll tweet about it, but we've been doing the work. The second thing is I'm having these real conversations with people that look like me about mincing words. We have to stop doing that. I had a conversation with someone recently, yesterday and today, because she likes to pull me into these things. And my argument was that if you voted for Donald Trump, you are a white supremacist. We talked about this. I don't care if you said that you hated Hillary Clinton. At the root of it, it's white supremacy. I don't care if you said Donald Trump was going to get you a job. At the root of it, there's white supremacy. I don't care if you're Black and you voted for Donald Trump. At the root of it, it's white supremacy. And once we start calling it what it is and realizing that the KKK and neo-Nazis and white supremacists and white nationalists and whatever you want to call yourself, they have real political power in this country, and they always have, then we can understand how to fight them better, how to combat that better. I think that for so long we've been so polite about it. We've been very polite about, oh, she's white, but she voted for Trump, but she just misunderstood. White women knew exactly what they were doing when they voted for Trump.
Right.
Over 50%.
We have to recognize that there is no fringe. There is no fringe. These are not clowns, like Steve Bannon said. They're not little rebels. This is America, and we have to start calling it what it is in order to fight it as best as we can.
And the crazy thing about it is white women knew what they were doing, but they also clearly didn't know that Trump ain't got their back either. And he's trying to take away resources and opportunities and protection for them, but also, to your point, I've literally stopped being friends with people who voted for Trump, because you don't value my life. Like, you can't value my life and say you voted for Trump. You are the actual system that allows for racism to exist. And so you can't tell me that just because of your hate, you voted for Hillary Clinton. Okay, you didn't want to vote for Hillary Clinton, that's fine, but you voted for a man who does not value us, and you're an idiot. So leave those friends alone.
And you know what? I think that, I'm sorry.
No, I just said far away.
Sorry, because you got to start it. Okay.
Right.
I think that at the root of it, white women knew exactly what they were doing, even though they were like, Hillary Clinton, I could never vote for her. I think a lot of them even knew that Trump didn't have their back. They knew this. But what was more important?
Their skin.
Their whiteness. Their whiteness was much more important. So, ma'am, you are a white supremacist, and I just can't be your friend anymore, period, point blank.
Right.
And I think that, you know, there were so many conversations on Facebook, and I saw one today of a classmate who was trying to dissect or separate white supremacists and the people who voted for Trump. And it just really enraged me, because it's like, not only did I go to a Ivy League institution with you, where we spent money for you to still come out and have this mind frame, it just really makes me upset, because it's like, education is so important, but you go to school with people who don't see your humanity, who see you as less than them, who really have probably only interacted with a black person because they went to school with you. They're not going out in the community to try to, you know, have different experiences or meet people who are from their different walks of life. And so college is a lot of the time the first time white people meet or interact with black people. And it just was enraging to me, because it's like, here we are in these institutions where we're having all these conversations, but people are still coming out uneducated. And it just enrages me.
Right.
And it leads to another question. I just want to skip to it, because I was going to ask you guys specific
Can I actually just add one thing?
Yeah,
This
yeah.
connects directly to what you were saying. I actually literally have found myself having to tell people to look up the definition of white supremacy.
Just read.
Because people don't seem to understand. They think white supremacy and neo-Nazi are literally equivalent. White supremacy is the entire system in which white people believe themselves to be superior to all others, and specifically to black people, which is the entire foundation of this country. So this entire
foundation of the world.
Exactly. Yes.
Like we taught you how to clean yourself.
Exactly.
Hygiene.
Exactly. So we live in a white supremacist country, and we live in a white supremacist world largely shaped by European colonialism. That is the world. So when people come to me and try to say that Donald Trump isn't white supremacist, I'm like, is he an American? He's a white man? Does he believe himself to be superior to other people in this country? He's a white supremacist. You know, so the thing is, I just wanted to say,
She ain't even some words.
This is what we're here
That's
for.
what I'm talking about.
Yeah, there you go.
This is what we're here for. Actually, I want to go back to what I was going to ask. Because, you know, the thing is that we do so much venting, which we have to do, but I think sometimes we like Christina, you noted a plan. Like, I wanted to talk a little bit about action. Like, what can we do? So Jameer, I just wanted to know from a policy perspective, thinking on local and state level, because in my opinion, that's where change needs to be evoked the most. Because to me, it's bottom up, not top down. What should we do to demand more visibility and accountability from our elected officials?
I mean, to be absolutely honest, screw our current elected officials. At this point, they need to move out of the way. The best thing that could have happened with Donald Trump election, which you alluded to earlier, which is that 11,000 women have signed up to run for office, which is powerful, because we know women in general they have to be asked dozens of times to even think about being prepared or qualified to run for office. And I think we need more Maxine Waters. We need more, why am I going to get her name wrong? Kamala Harris's. Yeah. We need more of those women to talk about the issues that we care about, have representation in those rooms and spaces that have been whited out for so long. But beyond elected officials, there's also city commissions. I mean, you have a city like New York that has dozens of city commissions that hold $1 million budgets that actually decides where school funding goes, where water work goes, where whether or not the roads are clean. So getting on those boards, those commissions, and also just running for office and being prepared to do that. And when you can't do that, it's showing up and showing out at those town halls and holding your elected officials accountable, because they assume that you're not paying attention, and they assume that they can do whatever they want, and the next year you'll just vote for them again. And so you have to show them that you're about your word, and if you don't hold them accountable for what they said they would do, you're going to remove them and replace them.
Can I add to that?
Yeah, no, sure.
I just had a meeting with Emily's List, and we talked about this because we were talking about trainings. And I think it's intimidating for a lot of people because you think you need so much to run. And you really don't. You really don't. I think the biggest thing is just fundraising. But there are so many resources, and I wish I could just give them off the top of my head, but I have them written down. I will share them with them. You know, if you want my email, I'll give them to you. But about how to fundraise, because that is the biggest obstacle for women who are trying to run that right now. But other than that, you need your damn self. And that's it. That's really, really it. They make it seem like it's so hard to become an elected official, and it's not. I think fundraising is just one of the big things. So if you just do your research, get out there, run.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I'm totally with these two brilliant sisters right here, because I think people need to be actually running for office. And I'll even, to also kind of open up the options that we have in terms of being representatives for our own communities, people should think about those other offices like community boards, school boards. You know, those are things which, you know, when you think about it, and I've even thought about this myself as well, because I want to be part of the community board for where I live. And I believe that what we need to recognize is that if we don't have ourselves representing ourselves, if Black women are not putting ourselves in positions of political power in order to make sure that we have the rights that we want, we won't get them. And also, I'll say that the community that has the highest voter turnout in the entire country, right, is Black women. Right? Black women are the most organized, smart, on point, and ready to lead group in this country. I'll tell you now, I believe it's absolutely true. I think Black women are the ones who, when it comes to real leadership, real egalitarianism, real progressive values, I really think it's Black women who are the ones who can contribute that to whatever has to happen in this country. And I think because we're the least invested in perpetuating white supremacy, it doesn't do anything for us, right? And what is good for us fundamentally, I think, is much better for everybody else.
Say that again.
You know what I'm saying? So, yeah.
Black
so
women
definitely.
win, we all win.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
I want to touch on something that you mentioned early, which is our allies. And sorry, this is kind of going around, but there was this whole Twitter discussion or social media discussion that we had also in the office today around Lady Gaga, who had tweeted the other day about asking how can non-racist white people be better allies to Black people. And I don't know if any of you watch Insecure, but one of the characters on there, her name is Amanda Seales, and she literally went in and was like, it's not our job to tell you, educate yourself. However, there were a lot of Black people that felt uncomfortable with her saying that. And so I just wanted to talk about allyship. That's not really a word, but we're just going to let it rock. How is there a proper way to be an ally? Or is it a continuous fluid process that has to be revised and revamped?
Yes. So first thing I'll say, Amanda, I agree with most of what she said. The portion that I didn't agree is expecting white people to go educate themselves. Because if they do that, they'll go on the web and find out information that is false, alternative facts, and they'll still be uneducated. So I think it's not our job, but I think there are people within our community that are willing to have those conversations, willing to teach those people those things, but pay them for their time. Don't expect to get this information for free and continue to utilize the bodies of Black people for free. But what I will say is that I think you can't decide to be an ally. Like, you can't wake up one day and be like, I'm gonna be an ally, without sitting down with a person of color and understanding what that is. Like, we have to invite you into that space. Like, this is not a safe space, really. It's a brave space. You have to be brave enough to hear what we say and take our criticism to the heart, because there's no reason for you to think that you can walk into a space and take up space and think you're advocating for the rights of Black women. Like, that's not how it works. So while I think it's fluid, I don't think it's a self, and you can't give yourself that title.
I'm sorry, I meant to actually point that towards Agunda, but everyone, can comment. But yes, Christina.
I got issues. I got
No, please
problems.
go ahead.
I'm having I'm a work in progress. Like, I think with anybody, like when you're growing, you're learning, and I'm trying to figure out what real allyship looks like, because it's been so many things in the past, like 3 years as this like new Black liberation movement has come to like a head, right? But I know what a damn sure ain't, and that's not white folk coming up to you and being like, I'm not racist. Like, I think that was what was problematic about Lady Gaga, is that she had to even like state it. You know, like, what do like non-racist like white folk like me do? Like, girl, you don't even have to do all of that. Like, for me, that's like, if you understood the system as it works, like white supremacy, just start there. Right. Just start there. But let's get rid of the I marched with you, because that ain't enough. I'm sorry, you don't listen. Right. I was in the civil rights. That's cute, but what have you done for me lately? Right. Hit him with a Janet. You know? But it's tough, because you get a lot of that. You get a lot of, well, I marched with you. Well, I'm not a racist. Like Michael Cohen, who is Trump's personal lawyer, yesterday literally tweeted out a bunch of photos of him with Black people and was like, I'm not racist, look. Right. No, I don't know what really, I think it's the first thing is understanding how white supremacy works on a global scale, and then understanding where you fall within that, right? Like, get that together first, and then we can talk about how you can be of service to people of color or marginalized folks.
Yeah. Absolutely. I definitely think the role of an ally, right? It's a strange word. It always comes out of my mouth funny for some reason. You know what I'm saying? There's something. It doesn't sound. But so in my perspective, when I think about someone who is really trying to, let's not even use the word, if someone who's really trying to understand what the experience of Black people is in this country, and then even connect it to Black people globally, right? If you're really trying to understand what that is, just like my sister just said here, you have to dismantle white supremacy. You have to figure out what scientific racism is. You have to know that the word Caucasian is only applicable if you're actually from the Caucasus Mountains in Georgia and Eastern Europe. It is not actually related to any of the European Americans in this country, because it's a scientific racist term. Okay, so you need to be able to know, like, all the little things that you do in your day-to-day life, right, that are connected to the entire psychology of white supremacy. And why I'm concerned about people not being able to be effective allies is because that is tremendous psychic work, right? I mean, that is ego-breaking work, right? And as yet, we haven't seen it done in any kind of broad, significant scale in European culture ever, right? So what I think about a lot these days is maybe meeting people where they're at to some extent, and trying to think about those folks who already are doing the work, who can be kind of connectors to other broader communities. Like, I have some white friends who I wouldn't even call them allies, I just consider them like woke, you know what I mean? Like, they know what's going on, and they are doing a lot of the work themselves around dismantling capitalism, dismantling race, gender, class, all these different constructs. And because of that, I can have certain conversations with them, even though there's always a point where you can't go beyond, right? There's always a point where you're like, I can't go past this. Exactly. It's always like, you know, but with those relationships, which I value, and I have a few of them, and I'm very lucky for these few women, particularly women, they're all women, who I know who are white women who know what's going on and are analyzing on their own volition, and they're not looking for me to come in there and like fix their life. But they also are people who I can find who can speak broadly to other communities about some of the stuff that we're concerned about, because white people need to pick up a lot more weight. At the moment, they're not carrying enough. They need to carry a lot more, and on a broader scale. And of course, I think young folks, the young white folks who are like kind of millennial kind of crowd, are a little bit more, I think, open to that. And it gets harder as the older the people are. Even in my mid-30s, I'm in my mid-30s, which is not old, right? But my people who are my contemporaries, white contemporaries of my age, are Richard Spencer is my age, right? And he's the head of the National Policy Institute, right? And he's the one who coined the term alt-right. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, there are things where we have to be able to think about who are the folks who are even seeing what we're talking about, and then try to see if we can build with some of those folks. Because I think there are always people who are a little bit more empathetic in culture in general. There's always like people who see more. And then maybe we could figure out how to like even think about what a really good ally looks like. And the last thing I'll just add on that is read Pedagogy of the Oppressed. Don't come to me. Go read Paulo Freire, all right? He's a Brazilian educator. He'll let you know about what you are as an oppressor, and then you can come to me and talk to me.
I want to talk a little bit about something that, Christina, you touched on just in doing this work in the media 24/7, reading. And sometimes I feel like I'm in my own little bubble sometimes because we are journalists, and you're taught to be objective, to get both sides. But as you mentioned, there's been this flaring up of advocacy journalism, which is just really calling a thing a thing. It's just, taking away all of this other stuff and just literally getting to the truth. And I just wanted to know, what do you say to those who criticize Black media, to those who say that the ownership lies within us to report on these issues?
First, I think Ali was trying to get your attention. Oh, okay. Okay,
okay,
thanks, Ali.
Yes.
Secondly, I just want to reiterate how exhausting it is just to be a journalist in general in this time, in this political climate, but also as a Black woman, because one, it's your job, and also you feel like it's your duty, right, to report. This is the thing, though. I'm struggling a lot, clearly. I've said it about a couple times up here. But I went to school for journalism. I went to Howard University. And you learn about being objective and so forth. And then you get out there in the real world and you realize that it's all bullshit. Like, the whole thing is bullshit. It's like these journalists who were writing, recently the movie Detroit came out. And I think it was Time, who's one of our sister brands, they reposted an article they had posted at the time of those Detroit uprising. And I read it, and when I tell you, it read like Richard Spencer wrote it. Fuck your objective, okay? Objectivity, because it doesn't exist. For forever, you guys have been spinning stories and writing them from your perspective. And now that women are in the newsroom, Black women are in the newsroom, we're going to tell it like it is. You're right. It's just calling a thing a thing. And so we often get backlash because it's like, oh, you're only talking about Black issues, and you're only, this is reverse racism, or this is bias. And let me tell you something. No, it's just the truth. It's just the truth. It literally is just the truth. And we also can afford to be a little biased because we're Black, and these are the issues we want to talk about. But we should have that freedom and we should have that freedom, because for so long we've been so suppressed. We weren't able to talk about what we wanted to talk about, or the issues that even matter to us. It is our time. So I would just implore everyone to still continue to support Black media, because we need it. I see a lot of criticism out there from people who look just like us. Little plug here, but even though Essence is owned by Time Inc., we are Black. We are Black women. Come in our office, you won't be like, oh, it's Black as hell up in here.
Same thing with HB.
Okay? It is Black. And support your Black media, because, we have brilliant minds who are leading the way and changing the good old boys club in those newsrooms and telling stories from our perspective with an intersectional lens. And we have to realize that this is what the world is going to look like. It's going to look like us. It does look like us, and it's going to look like us in the future. So we have to support the truth.
This topic is very heavy, so just sort of in closing, I just want everyone here to shortly just finish this sentence.
Can I mention the March?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Is that all right? So I just want to mention one thing just before we close out. So I'm actually on the steering committee of what we call the March for Black Women that's going to be happening in D.C. on September 30th. It's actually kind of connected to the 20th anniversary of the March on D.C. of Black Women that happened in '97. Mm-hmm. And then it's also very much about Black women coming together with other Black women to talk about addressing and dismantling state-sponsored sexual violence, physical violence, and other forms of violence, and especially lifting up our sisters who are in the Black Belt in the South, and also to lift up our Black trans women sisters as well. So this is gonna be Black as hell, and it's gonna be about Black women, activists. I'm talking about the women who we respect, the women who we know. They're the ones who are going to be supporting and endorsing this campaign. So I hope you guys can make sure to kind of learn more about what's going on. It's easy to find. So it's the March for Black Women that's happening in D.C. on September 30th.
No, thank you for sharing that information.
Mm-hmm.
So just, if we could just finish this sentence to kind of leave off on a uplifting note, because I feel like it's been uplifting, but I just want you guys to finish this. So Black women are. I can start. Black women are strong, we're resourceful, we're resilient, we have immense humanity, and we're here, and we're gonna be here.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I'd say Black women are global, are a threat, are brilliant, intelligent, dynamic, innovative as hell, multifaceted, rigorous, glorious, compassionate. Yes, and I'll say we are undeniable. Absolutely, cannot be denied.
Okay, Maxine.
I really love how you used the term, or you said that we were a threat. Mm-hmm. We really are. Mm-hmm. It feels radical, and that's okay to be radical. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, we are, right? Mm-hmm. So Black women are radical. Mm-hmm. But I think Black women are also the key to saving this world.
Yes. Right.
That's it.
Right.
Why I gotta go last? She didn't use all the words in the dictionary. I think, in the words of Angela Bassett, I think Black women are everything. Yes. Mm-hmm. And I'll just leave it at that.
Yes.
So I want to thank our panelists for coming out and having this conversation. Agunda, Christina, Jamira, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for speaking to us. I also want to thank Nan and the Reverend Al Sharpton for letting us have this conversation here in this safe space. Thank you to Twitter and the Twitter Blackbirds for collaborating with us in this important conversation. And thank you to my wonderful teammates at HB. I love you! Sorry, I know everyone's trying to go, but I really just wanted to read this and kind of do a call and response in the tradition of our African heritage. It's a quote attributed to Assata Shakur, and it's helped rejuvenate and restore in times of hardship. So I'm going to say the first line, and then I hope you guys can repeat. So, it is our duty to fight for our freedom.
It is our duty to fight for our freedom.
It is our duty to win.
It is our duty to win.
We must love each other and support each other.
We must love each other and support each other.
We have nothing to lose but our chains.
We have nothing to lose but our chains.
Thank you all so much.
Woo!